Welcome to the Healthy, Wealthy, and Smart podcast. Each week, we interview the best and brightest in physical therapy, wellness, and entrepreneurship. We give you cutting-edge information you need to live your best life, healthy, wealthy, and smart. The information in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and should not be used as personalized medical advice. And now, here's your host, Dr. Karen Litzy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I am your host, Karen Litzy, and today's episode is brought to you by Net Health. Net Health wants to help you maintain strong relationships with your patients, so they have created the Redoc Patient Portal. It provides video conferencing for telehealth in real time over a HIPAA-compliant video connection, secure messaging, sharing documents and photos, and your patients have 24/7 secure and on-demand access to their therapy health information without phone calls and voice messages. If you want to learn more about the Redoc Patient Portal, contact NetHealth at Redoc, that's REDOC, at nethealth.com. All right, on to today's episode. This was a great episode. So my guest is Eric Miller. He has been in the financial planning industry for over 20 years. He is the co-owner of Econologics Financial Advisors and the chief financial officer. He has a degree from Capital University and is a registered financial consultant and licensed insurance agent. He takes pride in helping practice owners become the financial heroes of their own stories and has taken this passion to over 600 families in the past decade. During this time, he's had over 15,000 conversations with practice owners regarding money, investing, practice expansion, practice transitions, taxes, asset protection, estate planning, and helping them shape their financial attitude towards abundance. Econologics Financial Advisors is an Inc. 5000 honoree for 2019 as one of the fastest growing companies in the United States. So Eric was awesome. He breaks it down. He makes all of this financial stuff so easy to understand. So in this episode, we discuss how to maximize the value of your practice, the business systems that add the most value to your practice and are the most attractive to potential buyers, financial considerations when planning your exit strategy, and easy, simple strategies to minimize your tax bill every year, because who wants to pay more taxes than they have to? So a big thank you to Eric for sharing all this information with us. And of course, thanks to NetHealth for sponsoring this episode. Hey, Eric, welcome to the podcast. I am happy to have you on.
Well, thanks, Karen. I'm really excited to be here. Yeah.
Now, before we get into our talk on, how to maximize the practice the value of our practice, in your bio, I read that you're a registered financial consultant. So can you explain to the listeners what that is and maybe how that differs from a financial advisor, an accountant? What is the differentiation there?
Yeah, no problem there. So I think when people hear that I'm a financial advisor, people kind of have the same impression that all financial advisors are alike, so to speak. And that's not always the case. There's some financial advisors that specialize in working with, ministers and teachers and all different kinds of professions. I just happen to work with private practice owners. Now, as far as am I licensed to do what I do? In the financial world, there's something called being a fiduciary. And when you're a fiduciary, that basically means that you have to do what's in the best interest of your client. Not all financial advisors adhere to that standard. We do. We're what's called a registered investment advisor, and we're held to that standard under the SEC guidelines. And then as a registered financial consultant, it's a designation that I picked up along the way, and it basically, there's certain criteria that you have to use to be able to get to that designation. It's as simple as that.
Got it. Yeah. So, we were talking before we went on, and it's kind of like if you're in the physical therapy world, which I am, and you go on to become, like a clinical specialist in orthopedics or a clinical specialist in pediatrics. It's like going on for a little bit extra education and certification in what you do.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay.
That's exactly correct.
Perfect, perfect. All right, so now let's get into the meat of this interview. So today we're going to be talking about how to maximize the value of your practice, perhaps plan for an exit of that eventually, and we're going to weave in some critical tax strategies that you might be able to use to save you money. So
Yes.
no one likes to leave money on the table. No one likes to feel like a dope because they didn't know what they were doing. So let's start with maximizing the value of your practice.
Yeah.
So first, what does that even mean?
That's a great place to start, because I think people automatically assume that when I say maximizing your practice value, it's just about money, right? It's just about, oh, what's the enterprise value of my business? And then that leads into, oh my gosh, he's going to talk about like profit and loss and EBITDA and all these really technical terms. But in my viewpoint, maximizing practice value isn't just about money. It's about the other parts of owning a business that you get value for, like time, right? Like you would want to build a business that gives you a lot of time. You'd want to build a business that gives you great relationships with either your employees or recognition from your community. So when I say you're trying to maximize the value of your practice, it's not just about the money. It's about all of those other things, because you look at it, most people that own a private practice, that is your largest investment. It's like the thing that provides the most cash flow to your household, and it is an investment. And anybody that's owned a business for any period of time knows that it's something that you have to care for, and that you have to make sure that you're treating like an investment and putting in the time and the money to make sure that you get the most value out of it. That's our definition for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So how can we as practice owners then maximize the value of our practice if, let's say, in the event we want to sell it, we want to exit our practice in
Yep.
whatever way we want that exit to happen?
There's definitely some key areas. Like you have to kind of assume the viewpoint of a buyer. Like if I'm going to buy your practice, Karen, like what are some of the things that I would like to see in place that would allow me to give you, top dollar for it? And I think number one, is your personnel organized? Okay. Do you have organized personnel? Do people have job descriptions? Do they know what they're doing? Do they know who to report to? I think that's key, because obviously if you have people in your organization that are aligned and are all kind of working together, you're going to have a really powerful organization if you can do that. If you don't, then you're going to have, this scattered business that everyone's kind of doing their own thing, and that's not good. So that's certainly one thing. And then, of course, just having good, stable systems that are built in your business, so that there's procedures that people have that they can follow. There should be an organization chart somewhere where people know like who's in charge of what. I think that's going to all add, value to your business. Certainly, if you look at like the facility, what's the facility look like? Is it in good shape? If you lease the building, do you have a good lease on it? Is there new carpeting? Is it a nice place where people feel safe to come to? Certainly a buyer's going to think about that. And then I think from an income standpoint, obviously you have to be solvent. You certainly don't want to have a lot of outstanding accounts receivable out there. You want to make sure your books are up to date and current. You don't owe any back taxes on the practice. You have multiple income streams in the business that multiple services that you provide, because no one wants to be reliant upon one of anything. So I think those are all some really key areas that if you can get those things in shape and you can get them systematized, you're really going to have something that someone else would want and they would value, and they're going to pay you a much higher amount for that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what I'm hearing is you really want to have an organization that's sort of a well-oiled machine where people know why they're coming to work, they know what they're
Yes.
doing once they get there, and reasonably happy at their jobs, if not very happy at their job.
Yeah, and I think that's you're exactly right. And I think the key, as the person that's in charge of it, is that you have to know what your role is in that business. So I think a lot of people that are in private practice, and maybe you can, attest to this, when you first started out, you're just trying to make things happen and go right. And, as you go on, you kind of realize, look, I'm not just a practitioner. I'm also an owner and I'm an executive. And those are completely different roles. And I think over time, if you can really make sure that you understand that those three roles are separate and that you have to make sure you master them to that degree, or at least hire someone that can do those things, that's really going to create you a valuable practice.
Yeah. And I mean, when you first start out, like I work with a lot of like first time entrepreneurs, you are the owner, the therapist, the executive, the
You're everything.
marketer, the pay, you're everything, right?
You are.
So let's say you have a practice like that where maybe you are a single owner practice, right?
Yep.
Or maybe you have one person, part-time person. So you don't have this sort of robust, huge practice. Can you sell that?
Well, you can sell anything. It just is a matter of how much you're going to get for it.
Mm-hmm.
So again, looking at from the buyer's perspective, he wants to buy something that's not dependent upon one person. He wants something that's going to be basically, he can assume that there's free cash flow there
Mm-hmm.
that is going to be worthwhile to him as an investment. So if you have like a single doctor practice or you're a single practitioner, I mean, you can certainly sell it. It's just not going to go for a very high multiple. See, most of the practices that we're talking about, are going to sell for maybe like a 1 to 2 times earnings. Whereas if you get, a bigger organization that has, 7, 8, 9, 12, 20 PTs on staff, there's executives in the office, it's going to go for a much higher multiple, could go as high as 8 to 10 of your earnings.
Mm-hmm.
So it is that kind of a game, but that's the journey.
Right. And, you had said you want to have a lot of systems in place. In your opinion, what are the most valuable or most important systems to have in place within your business, looking at it from a value standpoint?
I think definitely having a good financial system is really key, because look at, a lot of business owners don't like to confront the finance part of their business. And that's why they don't have much in reserves, and they're always kind of struggling for, gosh, I can't make payroll this week. And it's just a constant battle when you don't have good financial systems in place, because they're not paying attention to their money lines. And unfortunately, when it comes to your practice, that is the most important thing, is keeping that practice solvent, which means that there's more money coming in than what's going out.
Mm-hmm.
So that, personally, I think that's the most important. Some people would say a marketing system is really key, because let's face it, if you don't have more patients coming in, and a buyer's definitely going to want to see that. He's going to want to see that you have a system in place where that you're constantly getting new patients in the door, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then, I think a good quality control system is really, really key, because if people aren't, getting better, and you don't diagnose that quickly of, why aren't people getting better? Or, because that's what you do as a physical therapist. Your job is to get people pain-free, or reduce their pain. So I think that's a pretty key area too.
Nice. Yeah, I just had this conversation about the importance of a financial system, because I sort of switched my financial system within my practice around over the last couple of years, and it's made such a huge difference.
Oh, yeah.
I started looking at the financial system in percentages.
Yeah.
Sort of going off of Mike Michalowicz and the book Profit First.
Exactly. Like,
and
how
so,
much?
Yeah. So how much stays in the business? How much goes to me as an owner? How much goes to taxes? How much goes to profit? How much goes, and then making sure that when that money comes in, it is automatically divided up into those percentages. And it's made a huge difference.
Oh, that's so
Huge.
awesome to hear. It does. Because you've instilled control over your money right now, right?
Yeah.
And when you look at, like, what's a barrier for a lot of practice owners is that they don't feel like they have control over their money, right? And when you start putting in good control, it's kind of like when you're adjusting somebody or you're getting someone to feel better, right? You have to kind of put control in on that person. Like, I need you to do this and move here and do that. It's the same thing with your money. You have to kind of allocate it so that, your expenses are you channel your money to places where it needs to go to handle whatever expense that would be. And certainly, yourself, I think, is the most important person that you need to pay first.
Well, that's what Profit First says
Yeah.
too. No, it's true. Like, and once I started doing that, it made everything just lighter. Right.
Yes.
So now, like, quarterly taxes are coming up September 15th, or depending on when this airs, that might have just been that September 15th date. And I remember, like, years ago, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I don't know how do I not have the money? Now I'm like, oh, totally fine. It's where my money's where it's supposed to be. I am
Yep.
good. Like, this is exactly where it needs to be.
That actually is kind of like an underlying goal and purpose that I have. Is people always ask, like, what's the product of a financial advisor, and people think it's, hey, you made me 20 or 30%, or you help me save in taxes. Not really. It's, I like people to feel relaxed about their financial condition. And just what you explained to me right there, you're definitely much more relaxed about your condition now, because you have control over it and it doesn't control you. That's really awesome. I'm glad to hear that.
And it's a little stressful at first because it's different and it's a change. So I always tell people, if you're starting out now, start off this way, and holy cow, you'll be so much easier.
Yeah.
Everything is just, I feel so much easier. Just a sense of ease that I now know, like, yes, I have money set aside for this. It's already paid. Like, it's basically already paid for.
That's right. But it also does another thing too. It does make you look at and say, you know what, maybe I'm not making enough money in my business because I can't cover some of these other things. And I think that's the most important thing that people have to realize. And I'll go off on a little tangent here, but there's really two basic rules for me, income and expenses.
Yes, let's hear them.
The first one is that just get used to the fact that your business will try to spend every dollar that it makes and then some. And
yes.
And that's not just for a business. That's like a government or any household or organization. It's just going to try to spend every dollar that it makes and then some. But at the same time, it will also make the exact amount of money it thinks it needs to make to survive. So when I say that, people are like, what does that mean? I'm like, well, look, if you know that you have expenses coming up, somehow miraculously the business does make enough to cover it, doesn't it? It's just like, that's the way it is. So the trick to it is simply to make sure that your reserves and your profit and your taxes are just part of what the business thinks it needs to make to survive. And if you can get that in as what you said as part of that Profit First book, I think that's what he's talking about, is that it sets the right income target for what the business really needs to make. Because that's the biggest out point that I usually see with practice owners, is that I'll ask them, hey, what's your income target? And they'll say, well, I need to make, $30,000 a month to pay my bills. And I'm like, well, no, that's not what you need. You actually need 45 if you want to include your profits and building up reserves and paying your taxes. They're operating on a wrong income target. So I think that's really key, is to make sure you're operating on the right number. Does that make sense?
So don't underestimate it.
Completely.
Because I think oftentimes people will just look at, well, this is my rent, these are my utilities, this is my payroll if you're paying people.
Yep.
And these are, overhead costs that maybe we have to pay, phone bills, things like that. And that's it. And they're okay, so that's all I have to make.
That's right. And that's where their demand for income is. But if they put in, hey, I need another $10,000 a month for myself, I need another $5,000 for taxes, I need another because I want to make sure I have reserves. So if I have to shut down for another month, I can handle that. Right? You start putting all those things in. Now the number changes from, 35, I need to make 50. Oh, right. Okay, well, that's fine. How many more patients do I need to see a week, right, to be able to make that number? It just gets them, being in a problem solver, as opposed to like, I can't do anything about it kind of mode.
Yeah, and I do that. Like, people always ask me, well, how many patients, do you usually see a week? And I said, well, it's not how many do I usually see. This is what I need to see.
Yes.
To make X amount of money per week, so that I know per month, this is what I'm making. And my costs are a little bit lower because I have a mobile practice. So I'm not paying a lease on a brick and mortar facility, but I still have to pay my own rent for my apartment and I still got to eat. These are all the things that you have to put in. So it's not just what does the business need, especially if you're a solopreneur, what do you need to survive?
Yeah. And I think this is where a lot of people, a lot of practice owners and entrepreneurs think that their business is more important than their household. And, I'm under our philosophy, our viewpoint is that your household is like a parent company. Okay. You think about this, you look at all the big corporations out there and, people have opinions of them, but they do understand money pretty well. And they certainly understand that. I'll take Facebook, for example. Facebook owns, I don't know if you knew this, like 83 other companies. And they're the parent company to all those other companies, but everything flows to the parent company. Okay. Where your household is no different. Let's say you own a house, a business, maybe a piece of real estate, a 401k plan, a bank account, right? Those are all assets of the household. So you really, once you start treating your household like the parent company, then you set up the system so that, your household, you're meeting the goals and purposes of the household, which people, I think, they don't do that. They don't take care of themselves like they should.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got those financial marketing quality control systems, obviously 3 very important systems, and we can go on and on in systems. That's a whole other conversation. Yeah. So we will take those and people can run with them as sort of prioritizing their systems.
Good.
So now we've got all of our systems in place. Especially our financial system. So how do we plan? Let's say we're getting towards the end of our treating career, whatever clinical career, whenever that may come, and it may come at different times for different people. How do we efficiently plan for an exit? What do we do?
As far as like getting the business ready to exit out?
Yeah, like let's say you're getting ready to kind of exit out of your business. Now, we know that maybe you can try and sell it, or what if you're just like the business is done?
You're just done.
What do you do?
And on that note, we're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsor and be right back with Eric's answer.
This episode is brought to you by Net Health, helping you maintain strong relationships with your patients. The ReDoc patient portal provides a secure line of communication between you and your patients. Conduct virtual visits and have follow-up conversations with your patients via secure messaging when it's convenient for you. Patients have 24/7 secure, on-demand access to their therapy health information without phone calls and voice messages. Video conferencing for telehealth, secure messaging, share documents and photos, and view health information and appointments. To learn more, contact them at redoc@nethealth.com.
I mean, I think the first thing you got to realize, you got to look at your own financial readiness, or can you afford it? I mean, I think a lot of people, they get into a position where they're tired, they get exhausted, right? Because they've been doing things for themselves, or I'm sorry, just for the business. And then they just get burnt out, Well, burnout, what burnout is? It has nothing to do with that. It's just that you don't have a bright enough future in front of you. That's what burnout comes from, right? And I can see why a lot of practice owners get in that condition. It's like, I just keep doing the same thing every day and I can't see a bright future for me. So I might as well just sell the thing, okay? So the first thing that I do is just I try to rehabilitate. Like, do you remember why you decided that you wanted to be a business owner? Do you remember what the purpose was? And if you can revitalize that, I think you can get that person back on track. But look, at the end of the day, if you don't want to do it anymore and you want to sell your business, then, certainly, hiring a broker can help. Certainly finding someone, or just finding another PT that in the area that would be willing to take, you can sell the business to for goodwill, or it's not going to be for a very high price, but certainly you can find someone that would be willing to buy your practice for some cost.
Right.
It may just not be very much.
Right. And then what if you're ready to just wrap it up? You don't want to sell it. Are there things that one needs to think about as they wind it down?
You mean just close it down?
You're closing it down. You're moving on to greener pastures, if you will. So
Well,
you've decided to close it down. Are there any financial considerations that one has to think about in that scenario?
well, certainly look at how much money that you make from your business, even, money that through the cash flow that you make, it's sometimes a lot more significant than what people think. And certainly you can own the business. You can just, if you're a physical therapist, you can just go work for somebody else if you want to. But, I think people just have to realize that their business does provide them a pretty good living, and they just have to analyze that and say, do I have enough to replace that, or can I go to work for somebody else and replace that income?
Yep.
It's certainly not a good thing to do. There's 7 different ways to exit out of business, and that's one of them, just shutting it down. It's probably it's the worst way to do it, but I know that it does happen.
Yeah. What are the other ways? You could just name them. We don't have to go into detail,
sure.
but since you said there's 7 ways.
Put me on the spot now, Karen. I got to remember all of them, right? So, okay, so you can die with your boots on. Okay, you can close it down. You can sell to a associate. Okay, you can sell to a competitor. Okay, you can sell to private equity. Okay, you can gift the practice to somebody else. Okay, or you can have your employees buy it through what's called a ESOP plan. Those are the 7 ways that you can exit out of your practice.
Okay, great. Well, thanks.
What happens with most practice owners is they either sell to an associate, or sell to a private equity group, depending on the size of the practice.
Yeah. And so now let's talk about taxes.
Yes.
So,
eyes
taxes
got really big, guys. When you could see your eyes got big.
Who likes to pay taxes, right? Nobody likes to do it, but we all do it because we need the services that they provide, right? So let's talk about some tax strategies that might be able to save us some money.
Yeah. I think the first thing on taxes is that you have to realize that your accountant may or may not understand the tax code completely. And that sounds really weird because everyone assumes that they have an accountant. Hey, he's going to try to minimize my taxes. That's not really what their goal is. Their goal is to make sure that you are compliant, that you file your taxes on time. They're not necessarily doing tax planning for you. They're not trying to minimize your taxes. Okay. So I think that's the first thing, is that you really have to make sure you're working with an accountant that has the viewpoint that I want to try to minimize this tax bill as much as I can, because it won't happen by itself. You have to be proactive. You cannot take a passive role in minimizing your taxes, or you're just going to end up paying the most. Okay. The tax code's 3 million words, and no one's going to know every single passage of it. That being said, there are definitely some strategies out there that you can utilize. One that I've been talked about a lot is that you can actually rent your house out for 14 days out of the year, and you can collect that money completely tax-free. And you're probably thinking like, well, how would that benefit me? So where this came about was that in, I don't know what year it was, but if you've ever heard of the Masters golf tournament,
of course.
there's a lot of guys that have big houses there and on the golf course, and they rent their houses out for thousands and thousands of dollars. Okay. Well, legally, they can collect all of that money completely tax-free. Okay. Because the IRS code says you can rent your house out 14 days out of the year and get that money completely tax-free. You're probably thinking, how do I take advantage of that? Well, if you own a business, your business can rent your house out for 14 days out of the year. And as long as you have a legitimate meeting at your house, maybe you have with a key executive or even with yourself, right? You have an executive meeting at your house and you document that, then you can have the business pay for that. Okay. It's a business expense. And then you get that personally. And as long as you do it correctly, you can get that money completely tax-free. All right. That would be certainly one strategy you can use. It's called the Augusta rule. You can look it up online, and certainly there's
for the Masters.
That's where it came from. That's one. And right there, 14 days, let's say that it's $1,000, that'd be $14,000 that you could expense out in your business, and then you can get that personally. Now you have to do it right. You have to have a legitimate meeting. You have to
and you can't say it's $10,000 a night.
No, I don't know. In New York, you may be able to, right?
I
Like
don't know. That might be a stretch too.
If you needed to rent out like a hotel or a restaurant, that's what you would need to do. You need to go get like an estimate, like of where you would normally hold that meeting, just for documentation purposes. But like anything else, it can be done. You just have to follow through and have documentation, and I just have the accountant guide you on how to do that. That's certainly, that's one. That would be, 14, 15,000. So if people have kids, they can put their kids on payroll, and they can, show them. That would be another deduction that you can use. There's not a, there's certainly a lot more. I could probably go on all night. But I think another thing that people can do is just look at how they take their income. Like, you own a business, right? And most physical therapists are S corps, and a lot of accountants will tell them to take bigger salaries than what they actually need to be taking, right? So you can actually adjust your salary down as long as it's a reasonable compensation, and then take more in owner draws. That's going to help minimize the Medicare tax as well. So it really just boils down to finding the right information, finding a right advisor that can help you, and provide tax deductions that your accountant can work with to minimize. It can happen. Like, you should. It's your responsibility. And I say this a lot. It's like, I've never read anywhere where it's my responsibility to maximum fund the IRS, right? Like, I know I have to pay taxes. I get that, but there's no one that said that I have to pay, an ungodly amount of tax. But that's the way the IRS works. They just assume that your money is their money, and you have to be proactive to show them otherwise.
Yeah, I know this year when I paid my taxes, when I did my taxes for 2019, I was so excited because I only owed like $309.
Yeah.
After doing my estimated quarterly taxes, which I thought, well, this is great because I'm not giving them more throughout the year. And in fact, I was almost like spot on.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. But I thought it was pretty good. Because you don't want to, I understand when people get refunds, but if you got a refund, that means that you gave them more than was necessary throughout the year.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's something that you have to stay on top of, because as your business grows, your tax liability personally is going to be higher. So you really have to make sure you stay in good communication with your accountants. Like, you should be talking to them every quarter, especially now recently, where I think a lot of people have gotten the PPP loan. And if if that gets forgiven, well, physical therapists didn't really shut down. I mean, some of them did, but you were still collecting money. So, you really have to make sure that you're not going to have a tax problem for 2020. It could happen. So just getting in communication with your accountant, I think that will help.
Yeah. During the PPP loan phase in COVID, I was talking to my accountant literally every other day.
Yeah. It's good.
Does this make sense? Should I do this? Should we do this? Should I do this? Can I do this? Is this the right form? Do I feel? And I did get a PPP loan because in New York, we were done. When I say shut down, shut down.
Yeah.
Nothing, and eventually I started doing more telehealth visits. But in the beginning, it was quite scary. And so I said, I better apply for a loan. And I did get it. And now they haven't even asked, they haven't even filled out the forgiveness paperwork yet. But now I'm in contact with him weekly. Is this the right form? Did I fill this out right? Is this the right documentation I need? And he's like, yes, you're all good. So now when the time comes, I'll be able to get that in really quick.
Yeah, and it won't be a problem. And, you'll have your attention on other things that'll help expand.
Right.
And that's good. And that's not my experience. Most practice owners, they kind of don't confront it. They ignore it. And then it becomes a bigger problem down the line. And it's really needless.
Right.
So,
I think that's how I used to be. But I have now been rehabilitated financially. That's right. So, yeah, this was great. Now, what are, in your opinion, what are the key messages that you would like the listeners to kind of take away from this conversation?
Well, I mean, for me, look, I mean, you can, like, regardless of what your financial condition is, like, you can do something about it, right? And I think that's always been a pretty key, you know, philosophical viewpoint that I have. Like, I don't think that there's such thing as an unwinnable game. And I know that even things get a little murky and they get a little dark, and sometimes you don't really see, the future as bright as it could be. But if you just kind of like just do one thing, right, and complete that cycle of action and then go on to the next, then I think that starts to create more freedom for yourself. Like, people get overwhelmed so fast, right? There's so many different things to do, especially financially, right? That they don't just do what's in front of them while they're doing it. Like, just complete one thing at a time, and then you can go on to the next one, right? Like, do the next thing and then go on to the next one. And then to me, that's the key to success right there, is getting interested in something that you don't want to do, right? And completing it. And I think once you do that, you'll start to see a much brighter future of better things happening to you.
Yeah, great advice. Thank you so much. And
Yeah.
before we get going, I'm going to ask you the same question that I ask everyone, and that's, knowing where you are now in your life and in your career, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I would simply tell myself that there are destructive and constructive actions that you can do in life, right? And that those destructive actions, while they may appear fun at the time, will certainly prevent you from getting to your potential and leading the life that you want to lead, right? I know we're all young, we all kind of make stupid mistakes, and that's just part of the learning curve. But I would certainly tell myself, don't, your personal ethics is really part of your survival, right? And to the degree that you kind of keep yourself in good shape morally, and you do the right thing, better things are going to happen to you in your life. It's going to create more abundance for you. And I would tell myself that is just make sure you pay attention and do the right thing more often than you do the wrong thing.
Excellent. And now, where can people find you? On social media, website?
Yeah, so if you want to go for wealthforpts.com, you can download a free ebook that we have. You can certainly go to our website, Econologics.com. And then we have a YouTube channel, EconologicsFinancialAdvisors.com. And those would be three places that you can go to connect with us.
Perfect. And all of that will be at the show notes at podcast.healthywealthysmart.com under this episode. So one click will take you to everything. So Eric, thank you so much. This was great. I was taking copious notes, and every time I have these conversations, I'm always thinking to myself, hey, what do I need to do? What do I need to act on? And a lot of the conversations that I've had with folks like yourself, accountants, even on this program and in my own personal life, have just really been so valuable. So I thank you so much for taking the time out today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And everyone, thanks so much for listening. Have a great couple of days and stay healthy, wealthy, and smart.
A big thank you to Eric Miller for a wonderful conversation. And of course, thank you to our sponsor, Net Health. So again, Net Health wants to help you maintain strong relationships with your patients. That is why they created the Redoc Patient Portal. It provides a secure line of communication between you and your patient. You can conduct virtual visits, have follow-up conversations with your patients via a secure messaging when it's convenient for you. Patients have 24/7 secure on-demand access to their therapy health information without phone calls and voice messages. To learn more, contact NetHealth at Redoc, that's REDOC, at nethealth.com.
Thank you for listening, and please subscribe to the podcast at podcast.healthywealthysmart.com. And don't forget to follow us on social media.